I want to tell you something I heard at a roundtable discussion at the Game Developers Conference over 15 years ago, and I still think about it today. The discussion was about ethics in games. A roundtable discussion at the Game Developers Conference is different from a lecture. At a roundtable discussion, there's between 10 and 30 people, and rather than the person who's leading it lecturing to us, the person who's leading it is just facilitating a discussion between these random people who showed up. So the discussion was about ethics in games, and I was one of the random people who showed up. I also remember that NYU professor Frank Lantz was there. He was one of the other random people who showed up. And I remember that because of a comment he made pretty early on that was powerful. Some people were talking about a few games that they thought posed interesting ethical questions to players. I remember that Fable was one of the games that was mentioned. And I also remember that Frank Lantz groaned a little bit. And he came forward to say that games that try to pose an ethical question to players often fall flat for him. He has trouble with them. And he said that when they are trying to do that, there's really one of two categories they're going to fall into. Either the ethical question that's posed has some connection to the gameplay. Maybe one choice allows you to be more powerful in one way, but have a drawback in another, or something like that. The other possibility is that there is no connection between the ethical question and the gameplay. It's just at the story level. And he said if it's the first kind, the kind where the ethical question does have a connection to the gameplay, that he has trouble taking the question seriously because he sees the game as a game system that he's just trying to get through and maximize. So if one choice gives him more powerful potions or something, then that's the choice he's going to make, even if the game tries to tell him to feel guilty about it, he said. And on the other hand, if there's no connection, if it's just a story that has ethical questions raised in it, he has trouble with that too, because games are just so inherently an interactive media that it feels like a missed opportunity, or it's falling flat, or that if it's in a game and it's to be an interesting ethical question, that it really has to be something that the player is interacting with. So it's kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. And he said he didn't have a solution to this. He just said that he sees these two categories and he struggles with both of them. Then the discussion moved on and people talked about other games. And I remember Knights of the Old Republic came up. People really loved that. A second person, a third person, a fourth, all talking about how great Knights of the Old Republic is. I remember leaning over to Frank Lantz and saying, isn't this the exact problem that you were just bringing up? That you can be really good in that game and get good powers. You can be really evil in that game and get evil powers. You don't want to be in the middle though, because then you don't really get either of the powers. And so you make your calculations just based on what kind of gameplay you want, like regardless of any ethical questions. And he agreed completely and just sort of shook his head and he seemed frustrated. But then someone else spoke. And that person I now know was Andrew Tepper. Andrew Tepper was about to drop a bomb and totally demolish this entire roundtable. He explained that he's the creator of the MMO that no one's heard of called A Tale in the Desert. Now, I will tell you that A Tale in the Desert is a very primitive looking game. It looks pretty awful, honestly. This game is not a combat-based game. You work together and you have to cooperate to achieve things. So you're planting crops and you're doing the 20 steps to make paper and that sort of thing. Mr. Tepper said that he was generally disappointed with other games attempting to raise interesting ethical questions. I think he might have even said that he found it very childish. And then the moderator said, well, what do you find interesting? And that's when he dropped his bomb. So he told us some things that he's done in his game, A Tale in the Desert. First, he told us the story of Trader Malaki. In A Tale in the Desert, sometimes there are characters who are played by Mr. Tepper's staff. They're just role-playing to kind of enhance the story. And so this is one of those times. It was announced in the game that tomorrow at noon, a new character, Trader Malaki, is going to show up, and he's from a far-off land, and he has rare and valuable goods that he's willing to trade. You were supposed to line up in the center of town at a certain spot at noon, and he would trade with you one by one. So that time came the next day, and Trader Malaki did show up, and he did trade with the first person in line. The second person in line was a woman to whom he said, I don't trade with property, next. She said, what? And he said, women are inferior and have no place in trade negotiations. Whoa. Obviously, this was a startling moment. Some people said, well, of course we can't trade with this guy. I mean, listen to what he just said. And other people said, well, what do you mean? Who cares? It's just a game. And the first people said, well, yeah, it's a game, but he's expressing a real world view of hatred, and you trading with him is condoning that. And then some other people said, well, no, it isn't. He's a fictional character, and I don't share the views of this fictional character. I just want the powerful items that I can trade with him for. And other people said, how can you do that? He's so obviously sexist, and he's talking about slaves and treating women as property, and you're going to trade with him? And the other people said, well, again, it's a fictional character. Some people said that it is okay to trade with him, and it's not even women exactly that he's discriminating against. That in the real world, a man or a woman can be playing a character who looks female in the game, and it's just female characters within the game that he's not trading with. He doesn't know anything about the men or women outside of the game. And then some other people thought that that didn't really make it any better. And as you can see, everyone is upset and arguing. Someone else then said, well, if you're really mad about this, then wouldn't you be mad about a bunch of other things? What if instead of an Egyptian themed game, this was a high fantasy game and you were a warrior character and this guy wouldn't trade with wizards? So would you be just as mad then? And other people said, what do you mean would I be mad then? That's a career choice, whether I want to be a wizard or a warrior. This is different. This is like an inherent property of who you are. And they said, oh, inherent property. So what if it was like, he wouldn't trade with orcs that have like a certain shape to their horns or something, you know? Would you really be so mad at that? And then the other people said, look, you're getting way off into left field here. This isn't about orcs. This is a very carefully chosen misogynist view, a view that connects directly to the real world. And it totally matters that he has this sexist view. And it's really telling who is okay with that view and who isn't. Now, as you can see, this is totally spiraling out of control. And afterwards, I actually looked this up and I found that there were even a bunch of other arguments that people had made. Some people on the internet said that the problem here is that this is not something that players signed up for. And other people said, well, but it created a very interesting situation. And is it really so bad that the developer wanted to create this situation? I mean, you don't have to like every event in a game or something. And other people said, but you have to subscribe for like 6 months and it's non-refundable. So it really is a problem. And the developer really does have to care about exactly how much everyone likes every event. And then someone else says, oh, so the problem here is about the length of subscriptions. Like of all the things to be mad at, it's subscription length that's the real trouble, right? No, I mean, isn't the real trouble the people that went along with this sexist guy? Or what level are we even at? And that's what's so interesting about this whole debacle is that people are at all sorts of different levels of abstraction. Some people think that it's subscription lengths or the developer's actions, or that other people can't tell the difference between reality and fiction. But then the other side is that there is a connection between reality and fiction. And even though we're in a fictional world, we're having real relationships. We have real emotions. Our bodies are producing oxytocin for real with our friends in the game, even if they're not real friends in the game. And discrimination, even if it's not real discrimination in the game, is evocative of real discrimination. The point is, this was sure thought-provoking at the very least. But Mr. Tepper had more. Back to the roundtable discussion. He said that this was not the only experiment that he had run. There's another thing he did where he created something called a potion of speed. In the game, A Tale in the Desert, it's difficult to get around. It takes a long time. So this potion of speed is very, very helpful, but it comes with a big drawback. If you use the potion of speed, then you must use it again. You must use another copy of it within some period of time. And it's a pretty long period of time. And if you don't use it again within that time, then your character dies. And I mean dies permanently, which is totally crazy. So your character is deleted. If you drink this potion of speed, and then within that time period, you drink another potion of speed, then after that, you're going to have to drink a third one in an even shorter time, and then a fourth one in an even shorter time than that. And you can see where this is going. And if you haven't figured it out, this is Mr. Tepper trying to model addiction. He wondered if he put an addictive substance in the game, would it have the same effect as addictive substances in real life? And it turns out, obviously, yes, it did. And more people died from the potion of speed than from any other thing in the history of this game. Then he told us about another situation that he cooked up in this game. This time it was an election. So you can run to be the Demi-Pharaoh. And I think this might have happened like once per month. So there were several Demi-Pharaohs elected. I'm not sure on that. If you want to run for this office, the first thing you had to do is get signatures from other players that endorsed you. And then if you got enough signatures, you made it to the next round. Everyone in that round was then broken into groups of a few people, and each group got their own chat room so they can communicate with each other. Each group had the task of choosing just one person from that group, and only one, who would advance to the next stage of the election. So in other words, if you were in that group, you're there because you want to be elected. And so you find yourself arguing why you should be the one that moves on to the next stage and not everyone else. So what should you say? What you should say depends on what the powers of this office are. And this office of Demi-Pharaoh has exactly one power. And the power is that you can ban up to 7 characters in this game. And when I say ban, I mean permanently delete those characters. That is totally crazy bonkers of a power to exist. You are deleting other players' characters permanently. That's what you can do if you're a Demi-Pharaoh. So if you are running for office, then what should you say? Well, you're kind of forced to say how you're going to use that power. And furthermore, regardless of how you really intend to use that power, you're kind of forced to just say whatever it is that the other people want to hear so that they will choose you to go on. And Mr. Tepper didn't say this exactly, but I'm pretty sure that that was the whole point and that he knew that all along. I'm pretty sure that he knew that everyone was going to find themselves in the position of arguing, well, you really need to choose me to move on to the next stage of the election because I will never use that power. You see, I am so trustworthy and so stable and honest that you can be sure that if you send me on, that I'll never use the power. Now, you're going to say that no matter what. I think he was trying to let you learn what it's like to be a politician in real life, unfortunately. And now I'll tell you the punchline. At the point in time when he told us this story, no Demi-Pharaoh had ever used this power except once, to banish Traitor Malaki.